Greetings and welcome to this edition of
Positronic.
I'm Barry P. Cook. I'm here to give you my review of the latest episode of Doom Patrol. It was called Casey Patrol. And as it starts, we find ourselves watching a comic book graphic novel type sequence as Dorothy tells a story to her companions out in the woods, which seems to be a different story from the one in the comic book. We interrupt this episode breakdown and review for the following message. Hey, you, right there. I see you reaching to click out of this video. You're only like 2 minutes in, if that. Stop it. Watch the rest of the video. And if you can't watch the rest of the video, just watch a little bit more, will you? Maybe get to the halfway point. I'm getting views on my channel, but everybody's bailing in the first minute of the video. I mean, I know I'm not much to look at, but I'm not that ugly. So stop it. Keep watching the video. Like the video. Subscribe to the channel for crying out loud. Okay, now back to the video. We now return you to the video in progress. Apparently, it's a story of when she found a museum in a remote location seeking to acquire a necklace that had once belonged to her dad so that she could summon him from the afterlife. And we get to see what happened when the curator of the museum refused to give it to her, at which point she summoned Candlemaker to have him get it from the curator. She then says that with the help of the necklace and the dead boys, she was able to summon her father from the afterlife and hang out with him for a period of time. We then join a trio of drag queens who are apparently friends with Danny Street, who is now a van, containing a magical portal to the forest. When Danny tries to talk with Dorothy back in the forest at a camp there, she sort of pushes him away and says that he's hovering. When Morley, the head drag queen, goes to talk to Dorothy, Dorothy says she just wants to be left alone. Meanwhile, some mechanical bugs have entered the compound and they start biting people, which seems to immediately kill them. But then it turns out that it doesn't kill them. It turns them into something like robots, which apparently are straight out of Dorothy's comic book. When Morley asks Dorothy to summon Candleman, she says that the only one who can help in the situation is Space Case, the hero from the comic book that she's been reading, whose presence she immediately somehow manifests right off the cover of the comic. A moment later, Torminax, the villain from the comic, shows up at the van, but doesn't go through it. Space Case, now in the camp, vows to deal with him, after which they should be able to get everybody restored to normal, and then realizes she's hungry. And upon tasting some carnival food, she explains Great Caesar's ghost, which of course is a line from the old Superman TV show.
Great Caesar's ghost!
Torminax, meanwhile, activates something in the portal van as Dorothy explains to Space Case that she's not real. When Space Case almost takes out one of Dorothy's friends because she thinks it's a bad guy, Dorothy explains that she can't do that because death is permanent in the real world, which is interesting given that she talked about resurrecting her dad. Then all of the robot zombie people get activated at once, and Space Case, Dorothy, and Morley have to go through the portal, at which point they exit the van and encounter Terminox himself, who seems to want Dorothy's necklace. When Space Case can't attack him because he's her father, apparently, Dorothy calls on the Candlemaker, who seems to be helpless at the hands of Terminox, who turns him into a cube, just as he had previously turned the Danny van into a cube. It seems that the reason Space Case hesitated wasn't so much that Terminox is her father because she's battled him before. It was that he would be dead for real in the real world if she killed him. And she doesn't want that to happen, even though she hates his evil side. Turns out the Space Case's real name is Casey, interestingly, and she tries to talk her dad out of being a villain with the help of a local tagger who paints a mural of him pushing her on a swing. So they encounter him again, and she appeals to his good side, I guess, but it doesn't work, and she gets taken at gunpoint by her dad, who then demands Dorothy's necklace. It turns out that the truth is that Dorothy only has the necklace because the dead boys got it for her, and that she never actually had the chance to visit with her dad resurrected, and that she's struggling to grow up without her dad. She reveals that she wants to say a lot of things to her dad, but that maybe some things are better left unsaid, and she gives Terminox the necklace, telling him that he's awful for turning his back on his daughter, before he takes off with the necklace after apparently turning everyone back to normal. Casey then decides she wants to track down whoever's been writing her story and make them write her a new one, which causes Dorothy to finally decide that she could use a change of scenery. So Danny manifests a car and attaches it to Dorothy's trailer, which she then drives towards Cloverton with Space Case, seemingly to go and seek the help of the Doom Patrol. Meanwhile, Dr. Janus approaches the apparent writer of the comic book at his desk in some kind of void, it looks like a void anyway, to give him the necklace full of emotions, after which Terminox shows up with Dorothy's necklace to give him as well. And it seems that all of this is being done in service of Immortus, who apparently is still going to rise, and then give everyone their heart's desire. And that's where the episode ends. So I really liked this episode. I have liked all of the Danny Street episodes of Doom Patrol. They're always funky and cool and seem to have a good deal of heart, which I always like in a show. And, you know, it's interesting because the Doom Patrol itself wasn't in this episode. And this is probably the best episode of the season, which is, you know, kind of a sad commentary. Don't get me wrong. I like the show still. I really loved it in season 1 and season 2. Season 3, not so much. This season, I think, is better than season 4, but it's not all that good. You know, there have been great moments. And of course, I love Michelle Gomez, but it's kind of been lackluster. And this episode was just really good. I think the Dorothy character is excellent. And I think it's one of the reasons that season 3 and this season so far haven't been that good, because she hasn't been in it. I mean, there are other reasons, but that's one of them. And so I'm glad that she's back. And, you know, I think she's probably the character from this show that has the biggest reason to be kind of messed up, because her dad kept her prisoner in her room so she wouldn't hurt people with Candlemaker, but it messed her up, you know? And she's still kind of a kid, even though she insists she's not. So it's easy to feel for that character. Whereas the other characters and their other problems, you know, you kind of feel like, grow up already, you know, like man up, put on your big boy pants, you know, your big girl pants, except for maybe Jane, who's mentally ill. But, you know, it gets trying week after week listening to them woe as me. And I don't know, I guess it didn't bother me so much in the first couple of seasons because they were new, but it's 4 seasons on now, and it's like, really? And that seems to me to take up too much of what happens in the episodes from week to week. But this season is better than last season, so I'm happy for that. I just thought that this episode was even better than the other episodes of the season. So I just thought it was really good. I really liked the Dorothy character. I thought the drag queen character was cool. I like drag queens in general. I think they're cool. And, you know, it also brought in this comic book element of Space Case, which was very funny because she behaves in a very comic book way as opposed to a real world way. And it was funny to see. And, you know, Terminox is a cool, like, alien villain. So that was cool to see. And I was glad that at the end they tied it to the overall plot, because at first I was like, oh, this is just going to be like a one-off, you know, self-contained episode. But no, it's tied to what's going on in the overarching story, because Terminox was only after the necklace because it has something to do with Immortus. So that was a cool aspect of it as well. And Space Case is going to be in the next episode. Apparently, we're not done with Space Case next, which I think is cool. I think it's a cool addition to the show. I just hope that we get to see more Danny Street. I like Danny Street. So that's it, really. I guess this was a really good episode, probably the best of the season. And, you know, I'll be back to review next week's episode once it's released. Until then, I take my leave and I wish you peace and long life.